My son handed his father-in-law a golden envelope containing a $22,000 trip to Dubai. Then he tossed a greasy scratch-off ticket at me worth exactly $1.50. He told everyone at the table that I was lucky to even be invited. He did not know that the dirty piece of paper he threw in my face was actually worth $4.8 million. Now my phone is vibrating on the table with 67 missed calls from him. But I am not answering. Today I am not a father. I am a creditor, and I am coming to collect everything he took from me. Before I tell you how a simple piece of paper destroyed my ungrateful family, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps this old man share his story. And tell me in the comments, what is the most disappointing gift you have ever received? I am reading every single comment. The waiter poured a bottle of red wine that cost more than my monthly electric bill into Richard's glass. I watched the dark liquid swirl, trying to keep my hands from trembling under the white tablecloth. This was supposed to be a Father's Day celebration, but for the last hour I had felt more like a ghost haunting a banquet of the living. We were at the Obsidian, the most expensive steakhouse in the city. The kind of place where the lighting is dim to hide the prices on the menu, and the air smells of truffles and old money. My son Justin sat at the head of the table. He looked like a king in his tailored Italian suit, his hair slicked back a Rolex gleaming under the chandelier light. He was laughing loudly at a joke his father-in-law Richard had just made. I sat at the far corner of the table near the kitchen service door. Every time a waiter walked by, the door swung open and hit the back of my chair. But Justin did not notice. His eyes were fixed on Richard. Richard was everything I was not. He was tanned loud and wore a gold bracelet that clinked against his plate every time he cut his steak. He owned a chain of car dealerships and never let anyone forget it. I looked down at my own hands. They were rough-scarred from 40 years of handling molten steel at the Pittsburgh mills. I had scrubbed them for 20 minutes before coming here, but the grease and soot of a lifetime seemed permanently etched into my skin. Justin tapped his spoon against his wine glass. The sharp sound cut through the chatter. "Attention, everyone," Justin announced, standing up. His voice boomed with that confident salesman tone I had paid $200,000 in tuition for him to learn. "Today is about honoring the men who built us, the pillars of our family." I sat up a little straighter. I adjusted my tie. It was an old tie, a bit frayed at the edges, but it was my best one. I remembered the nights I worked double shifts at the foundry, sweating until I was dehydrated, just so Justin could have brand new textbooks instead of used ones. I remembered selling my wife's jewelry to pay for his first car, so he wouldn't be embarrassed at college. Justin turned to Richard with a beaming smile. "Richard," Justin said, holding out a thick, gold-embossed envelope. "You have been a mentor, a guide, and a second father to me. Brittany and I wanted to give you something that matches your stature." Richard opened the envelope. He pulled out 2 plane tickets and a brochure. His eyes widened. "First class to Dubai," Richard read aloud, holding the tickets up for the whole restaurant to see. "And a 7-night stay at the Burj Al Arab. Justin, my boy, you have outdone yourself. This is magnificent." The table erupted in applause. Brittany, my daughter-in-law, clapped the loudest, looking at her father with adoration. $22,000, I calculated in my head. That was the exact amount Justin had told me he was short for his business payroll last month. The money I had offered to loan him from my emergency heart surgery fund. He had taken my money, claimed his business was drowning, and used it to send another man on a vacation. The applause died down. Justin remained standing. He turned his head slightly and looked at me. The smile on his face changed. It lost its warmth. It became the polite, strained smile one gives to a beggar. "And Dad," Justin said. His voice dropped an octave. I held my breath. I did not want a trip to Dubai. I did not want a Rolex. I just wanted him to look at me the way he looked at Richard. I wanted him to acknowledge that the suit he was wearing existed because I wore rags for 20 years. Justin reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, crinkled piece of paper. It was a scratch-off lottery ticket, the kind you buy at a gas station for $1.50. It even had a coffee stain on the corner. "I know you love to gamble." Justin chuckled, tossing the ticket onto the table. It did not even reach my hand. It landed in the butter dish. "Maybe you will get lucky and win $5, Justin said. "It would be a nice change from that old pension check, right?" The table went silent. But it was not a respectful silence. It was awkward. Richard covered his mouth to hide a smirk. I stared at the ticket sitting in the yellow butter. I felt a heat rising in my chest, hotter than any blast furnace I had ever worked in. Brittany leaned forward. She swirled her mimosa, looking me up and down with eyes that felt like ice picks. "Oh, Garrett, don't look so disappointed," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Honestly, looking at that suit, maybe you should have used the money to buy a new jacket instead of waiting for handouts. You look like the valet parking attendant. I almost handed you my keys when we walked in." Laughter. A few polite stifled giggles from the guests, but Richard laughed openly. My hand clenched into a fist under the table. This suit. She dared to talk about this suit. I bought this suit 10 years ago for their wedding. I paid for the wedding. I paid for the open bar where she got drunk. I paid for the limousine she threw up in, Justin, I said. My voice was low, raspy. "Is this a joke?" Justin sighed, rolling his eyes as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Don't start, Dad," he said, sitting back down and signaling the waiter for more wine. "Don't be ungrateful. Richard is a strategic partner. He brings value to the family network. You are retired. You don't need things. You need to learn to be happy with what you get." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only I could hear, but it was loud enough to shatter my heart. "Stop embarrassing me, old man. Take the ticket and smile. Richard is the future. You are just Dad. You are history." The air left my lungs. "You are just Dad." I looked at my son. Really looked at him. I searched for the little boy who used to cry when I left for the night shift, the boy who promised he would buy me a big house one day. He was gone. In his place was a stranger with cold eyes and a heart made of stone. Slowly, I reached out. My calloused fingers shaking slightly, picked up the lottery ticket from the butter dish. I wiped the grease off with the edge of the napkin. "Thank you, Justin," I said. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, making Brittany flinch. "Where are you going?" Justin asked, annoyed. "We haven't even cut the cake." "I am not hungry," I said. I placed the ticket in my breast pocket right next to the picture of my late wife. "Enjoy Dubai, Richard. I hope the flight is worth what it cost my son." I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I heard Justin say something about me being senile and dramatic, followed by the clinking of wine glasses. They went back to their celebration before I even reached the exit. I stepped out into the cool night air. It had started to rain. I had no car because I had sold it to help Justin with a down payment on his house 3 months ago. I began the long walk to the bus stop, the rain soaking through my thin, cheap suit. I reached into my pocket and touched the lottery ticket. I pulled it out. I stood under the flickering light of a street lamp, water dripping from the brim of my hat. $1.50, I whispered to the empty street. That is what my dignity is worth to him. I almost threw it in the trash can next to the bus bench. I raised my hand to toss it away. But then a strange feeling came over me. A memory of my wife Sarah saying, "Garrett, luck finds you when you stop chasing it." I took a coin from my pocket, a quarter, and I started to scratch. I scratched the first line, a cherry. I scratched the second line, a cherry. My heart gave a little thud. I scratched the third line. I stopped breathing. The rain kept falling, but I couldn't feel the cold anymore. I looked at the number under the matching symbols. I looked at it again. I wiped the rain off the paper to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. $4.8 million. I did not scream. I did not jump. I stood frozen on that street corner, holding a fortune in my hands, while the image of my son laughing at me played over and over in my mind like a horror movie. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Justin. "Don't forget to transfer your Social Security check to the joint account tomorrow. I have bills to pay." I looked at the text. Then I looked at the ticket. A fire ignited in my belly. It wasn't joy. It was rage. Cold, calculated rage. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was history. But as I stood there in the rain clutching $4.8 million, I realized something. I wasn't history. I was the reckoning. The rain was coming down harder now, transforming the city streets into rivers of gray sludge. My shoes, which I had polished just 3 hours ago for the dinner, were now soaked through. I could feel the cold water seeping into my socks, numbing my toes. It was a 3-mile walk back to my small house on Elm Street. I should have been driving my old Ford truck, but it was sitting in the driveway with a busted transmission. The mechanic wanted $600 to fix it. I did not have $600. I had given my last spare cash to Justin last month for what he called a marketing emergency. I stopped under the awning of a closed bakery to catch my breath. My chest felt tight, not just from the exertion, but from the weight of the humiliation I had just swallowed. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled lottery ticket. The bright colors on the paper seemed to mock me in the dim streetlight. "Win for life," it said in bold, cheerful letters. It felt like a piece of garbage. It was a symbol of how little my own son thought of me. He gave his father-in-law the world, and he gave me a scrap of paper he probably bought with the change in his pocket while getting gas. Anger flared in my gut again. I looked at the metal trash can next to the bakery entrance. It was overflowing with wet coffee cups and sandwich wrappers. "This belongs in the trash," I muttered to myself. Just like me, apparently. I raised my hand to throw it away. I wanted to be done with it. I wanted to erase the memory of their laughter and the pity in Brittany's eyes. But as my hand hovered over the bin, I froze. I could almost hear my wife Sarah whispering in my ear. She had been gone for 5 years, but her voice was as clear as the rain falling on the pavement. "Garrett," she would say, "never throw away a chance, no matter how small. Luck is just God's way of winking at you when you are looking the other way." Sarah loved scratch-off tickets. She never won more than $20, but she always said the thrill was worth the dollar. She used to scratch them with a specific coin, a silver quarter from 1965 that I found the year we got married. I lowered my hand. Slowly, I reached into my other pocket. My fingers brushed against the cold metal of my keys and loose change. I felt around until I found it, the 1965 quarter. I had carried it every day since she passed. "Fine, Sarah," I whispered to the empty air. "One last time. For you." I leaned against the wet brick wall of the bakery. I used the edge of the quarter to scrape off the latex coating on the first line. The sound was a harsh scratching noise against the silence of the night. A star. I scratched the next spot. A star. My heart gave a tired little thump. Probably just a $2 winner. Just enough to buy a coffee to warm my hands. I scratched the third spot. A star. I paused. 3 stars meant a prize. I looked down at the prize box at the bottom of the card. I expected to see $5, maybe 10. I scratched the prize box. The first number was a 4, then a comma, then an 8, then lots of zeros. I blinked. The rain must be playing tricks on my eyes. I wiped the ticket against my dry shirt sleeve, smearing a bit of the latex dust. I held it up closer to the street lamp. $4,800,000. The world stopped. The sound of the traffic faded away. The cold rain on my face didn't matter anymore. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. 4.8 million. I should have been jumping up and down. I should have been screaming at the sky. That is what people do in movies, isn't it? They scream, they dance, they call everyone they know. But I just slid down the brick wall until I was sitting on the cold, wet concrete. I pulled my knees to my chest, and I started to weep. Great heaving sobs shook my body. I wasn't crying because I was happy. I was crying because the one person I wanted to tell was 6 feet under the ground in the St. Mary's Cemetery. Sarah. I choked out, clutching the ticket so hard it almost ripped. We could have fixed the roof. We could have gone to Italy like you always wanted. We could have paid for the best doctors when you got sick. The money felt like a cruel joke. It came 5 years too late to save the love of my life, and 2 hours too late to save my relationship with my son. I sat there for a long time, a millionaire in a soaked suit, crying like a child in the middle of a thunderstorm. I had never felt more rich, and I had never felt more incredibly lonely. Eventually, the tears stopped. I wiped my face with my wet sleeve. I looked at the ticket again. This piece of paper was freedom. It was power. It was the security I had sacrificed to give Justin a head start in life. Suddenly, my phone vibrated violently against my chest, startling me. I pulled it out. The screen lit up the darkness. Justin calling. For a split second, instinct took over. I wanted to answer. I wanted to shout. Justin, I won. We are rich. Everything is going to be okay. My thumb hovered over the green answer button. I could fix everything. I could pay off his debts. I could buy his love back. Maybe if I gave him this money, he would look at me with respect again. Maybe he would look at me the way he looked at Richard tonight. But then I remembered the butter dish. I remembered him tossing this ticket at me like I was a dog begging for scraps. I remembered him calling me history. I took a deep breath and swiped right. Hello? My voice sounded weak, raspy. Dad, finally. Why didn't you answer the first time? Justin's voice was impatient, loud. There was no apology for the dinner, no concern that his 70-year-old father was walking home in a storm. I am walking home, Justin. It is raining. Yeah, well, listen, Justin cut me off. I need you to come by the office tomorrow morning. Early. Like 8 a.m. Why, I asked. I need you to sign those power of attorney papers for the house, he said. He spoke fast, like he was trying to sell me a used car. And the deed transfer. I have an investor ready to put up capital, but he needs collateral. I told him we would use your house. It is just a formality, Dad. You still live there, obviously. I just need the paper leverage. My hand tightened around the phone. He didn't call to see if I was safe. He called to take the last thing I owned. He wanted to gamble my home on his failing business schemes. Dad, are you there? The signal is bad. Just say yes. I need to text the investor tonight. I looked down at the lottery ticket in my other hand. $4.8 million. If I told him now, he wouldn't want the house. He would want the ticket. He would say he bought it. He would say it was a gift, so technically it was his. He would drain me dry, just like he drained my retirement account. A coldness settled over me, chilling me deeper than the rain ever could. It was the coldness of clarity. I am here, Justin, I said. My voice was steady now. The weakness was gone. Good. So 8 a.m. Don't be late. And wear something nice, Dad. Not that suit you wore tonight. It smells like mothballs. I looked at the ticket one last time, then folded it carefully and placed it inside my jacket, right against my heart. "I will be there, Justin," I said. I hung up the phone. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone. I simply stood up, brushed the dirt off my pants, and started walking home. I had a secret, a $4.8 million secret. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to share it with my son. He wanted me to sign papers. Fine. I would sign papers, but they would not be the papers he was expecting. The rain kept falling, but I didn't feel it anymore. I walked with a new rhythm, the rhythm of a man who just realized he was holding the sword, not the shield. The war had started, and Justin didn't even know his opponent was already on the battlefield. The revolving door of First National Bank spun heavily as I pushed through it the next morning. The air conditioning inside hit me like a wall of ice, chilling the sweat that had gathered on my neck during the walk over. I was wearing my second-best suit today, a gray flannel one that smelled faintly of cedar and old memories. I had checked the lottery ticket 3 times before leaving the house, keeping it tucked safely inside a zippered pocket in the lining of my jacket. But I was not here to deposit $4.8 million. Not yet. I was here to see exactly how deep the knife in my back had been twisted. The bank was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of computers and the murmuring of a few customers. I walked up to the counter where Nancy was working. Nancy had been a teller here for 20 years. She knew me. She knew Sarah. She had given Justin a lollipop when he was 6 years old, and I opened his first savings account. "Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne," Nancy said, but her smile was tight. It did not reach her eyes. She shifted comfortably in her chair and avoided looking directly at me. "Good morning, Nancy," I said, leaning against the cold marble counter. "I just need to check the balance on my retirement money market account, the one Justin helps me manage." I tried to keep my voice steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. I knew something was wrong. I could smell it in the air, like the scent of ozone before a transformer blows at the factory. Nancy hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Are you sure you want a printout, Garrett?" "You can check it online," she suggested softly. "I am old-fashioned, Nancy. You know that. Just print it for me, please." She sighed, a small, sad sound that made my stomach turn over. She typed something, the keys clicking rapidly. Then the printer whirred. She tore off the slip of paper, folded it in half, and slid it across the marble counter toward me. I picked it up. My hands were shaking. I unfolded the paper. I expected to see a number lower than usual, maybe 300,000. Maybe 250 if the market had taken a bad turn. I was prepared to be angry about bad investments. I was not prepared for what I saw. $14.50. I stared at the number. The black ink seemed to swim on the white paper. $14. Not 14,000. 14. I blinked, waiting for the rest of the numbers to appear, but they did not. The paper was static. The number was real. $350,000. Gone. That money was not just digits in a computer. That money was 30 years of double shifts at the blast furnace. It was the vacations I never took. It was the new car I never bought, so I could save for a rainy day. It was the life insurance payout from when Sarah died, money that I had sworn to keep safe for my own end-of-life care, so I would never be a burden to anyone. "Nancy," I whispered. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "Is there a mistake?" Nancy shook her head. She looked like she wanted to cry. "Justin was here last Tuesday, Garrett. He came in with the power of attorney documents you signed 3 years ago. He said there was an urgent investment opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime deal that had to be funded immediately. He wired everything out to an offshore account." I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Last Tuesday. Last Tuesday was when he told me he was broke. Last Tuesday was when he asked me to borrow $500 for groceries because things were tight. An urgent investment. The image of Richard holding up the golden envelope flashed in my mind. The first-class tickets to Dubai, the 7-night stay at the Burj Al Arab, the $22,000 price tag that Justin had bragged about. He did not have an investor. He did not have a business profit. He had me. I was the investor. I was the one paying for Richard to sip champagne at 30,000 feet while I walked 3 miles in the rain because I could not afford to fix my truck. He emptied my life savings to buy the affection of a man who thought I was a joke. I felt a wave of nausea rise up in my throat. I had to swallow hard to keep from vomiting right there on the pristine bank floor. It was not just theft. It was an erasure. Justin had looked at my life, at my blood and sweat, and decided it was worth less than a week of luxury for his father-in-law. Did he say anything else? I asked, my voice barely a croak. He said. Nancy paused, looking down at her hands. He said you were slipping, Garrett, that your memory was going. He said he needed to protect the assets before you gave them away to some scammer on the internet. He told the manager he was doing this for your own good. For my own good. The rage that had started last night as a spark was now a roaring inferno. He had painted me as senile to rob me blind. He had used the trust I placed in him, the power of attorney I signed when I had my hip replacement surgery, to strip me of my dignity. I looked at the slip of paper again. $14.50. That was all I was worth to him. A rounding error. I carefully folded the paper and put it in my wallet right next to the lottery ticket. The contrast between the two pieces of paper was staggering. One represented my past stolen and squandered. The other represented my future, a weapon of mass destruction that Justin did not know I possessed. Thank you, Nancy, I said. I was surprised by how calm I sounded. It was the calm of a man who has nothing left to lose and therefore has nothing to fear. Garrett, are you okay? Do you have enough for groceries? Nancy asked, reaching for her purse. I held up a hand to stop her. I am fine, Nancy. I have never been better. I turned and walked away from the counter. My footsteps echoed loudly in the silent bank. I passed a young father holding his little girl's hand, helping her deposit coins into a piggy bank. The sight pierced my heart. I used to be that father. I used to hold Justin's hand just like that, promising him I would always take care of him. I had kept my promise. I had taken care of him until I had nothing left to give. But he had broken his. I pushed through the revolving door and stepped out into the bright, harsh sunlight of the morning. The city noise rushed back in, but I felt detached from it all. I reached into my pocket and touched the lottery ticket. It felt warm against my chest. I was not a father anymore. A father provides, protects, and forgives. I could not afford to be that man any longer. I was a gold mine that had been dug out, hollowed, and abandoned. But Justin had made a fatal mistake. He forgot that sometimes when you dig too deep into the earth, you don't just find gold. Sometimes you hit a gas pocket. And if you are careless with a match, the whole mine blows up in your face. I walked to the curb and hailed a taxi. I didn't care about the cost. I had a meeting to prepare for. Justin wanted me to come to his office to sign over my house. He wanted to take the last bone from the carcass. Fine. I would go. I would look him in the eye. I would let him think he had won. Because the higher he climbed on the ladder he built from my bones, the harder the fall would be when I kicked it out from under him. The glass doors of Hawthorne Real Estate slid open with a soft hiss. I stepped onto the plush gray carpet that was thicker than the mattress I slept on. The air inside smelled of expensive cologne and ambition. This was the empire my son had built. Or rather, the empire he had built using the bricks he stole from my foundation. I had decided to play the part of the desperate, broken old man one last time. I slumped my shoulders forward. I let my hands tremble slightly as I approached his desk. I even wore my old work boots, the ones stained with 10 years of factory grease, just to see if he would notice. Justin was sitting behind a desk made of mahogany that was big enough to land a helicopter on. He was on the phone laughing loudly. "No, tell him the offer stands until noon. After that, the price goes up 10%. Yeah, I know. I am a shark." He saw me standing there. The smile vanished from his face instantly. He held up a finger to me, signaling me to wait, and spun his chair around so his back was to me. I stood there for 10 minutes, listening to him brag about closing a deal on a condo complex downtown. Finally, he hung up. He swiveled back around, checking his watch. It was a Rolex Submariner, brand new. The blue dial caught the light. That watch cost more than the heart surgery I was about to lie about. "Dad," he sighed, tapping his pen on the desk. "You are early. I thought we said noon for the notary. I have a client coming in 20 minutes. I am not here for the notary." "Justin," I said, keeping my voice low and shaky. "I need to talk to you. It is urgent." Justin frowned. He picked up his phone and started scrolling through emails while I spoke. "Make it quick, Dad. Time is money." I took a deep breath. I placed my trembling hands on the edge of his desk. "I went to the doctor this morning," I lied. "My heart, Justin. The valve is failing. They need to operate immediately. If they don't, I might not make it through the month." Justin stopped scrolling. He looked up. For a second, just a split second, I saw a flash of fear in his eyes. But then he blinked, and it was gone, replaced by calculation. "Okay," he said slowly. "So what does the insurance say?" "Medicare covers that stuff, right? That is the problem." I said, "There is a specialist. He can do a new procedure that is safer, but insurance won't cover the deductible up front." "I need $5,000, Justin. Just 5,000, to save my life." I watched him. I watched the man whose diapers I had changed, whose tuition I had paid, whose debts I had cleared. I waited for him to reach for his checkbook. I waited for him to say, "Don't worry, Dad. I have got you." Instead, Justin leaned back in his leather chair. He let out a long, frustrated breath. He ran a hand through his hair. 5,000, he repeated. "Dad, that is a lot of cash right now." I looked at the Rolex on his wrist. It was worth 15,000 easy. "Justin, please," I begged, letting a tear escape my eye. It was a real tear, but not for the reason he thought. "It is my heart. Look, Dad." "I wish I could help," Justin said, spreading his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "But I am illiquid right now. Everything is tied up in land deals. The market is tight. I literally don't have the cash on hand." "You just sent Richard to Dubai," I said softly. Justin's face hardened. He slammed his hand on the desk. "That was business," he snapped. "Richard is an investment. You are—" "Look, Dad, let's be realistic. You are 70 years old. You have had a good run. Do you really need a fancy specialist? The state doctors are fine." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Actually, this works out perfectly. If you are really that sick, why are you holding on to that big empty house?" I froze. There it was. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Sell the house, Dad," Justin said, his eyes lighting up with greed. "Sell it to me today. I will give you the cash for your surgery out of the equity. It is the only way. I mean, let's be honest. You are going to die eventually, and the house comes to me anyway. Why make us both wait? If you sign the deed today, I can get you the money by next week." Next week. He wanted me to sign over my home, the place where his mother died, for a promise of money next week. He was bargaining with my life. He was willing to let me wait, risking a heart attack, just so he could get the title deed cheaper. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, that had nothing to do with a failing valve. My heart was fine physically, but emotionally it had just stopped beating for my son. "So that is your answer," I whispered. "You won't help me unless I give you everything first." "It is just economics, Dad," Justin said, shrugging. "Don't be dramatic. I am trying to help you manage your assets." Suddenly, the glass door swung open. Brittany breezed in. The scent of expensive perfume filled the room, overpowering the smell of my old work clothes. She was wearing a white dress that probably cost more than my truck, and on her arm was a bright orange Hermès Birkin bag. I knew that bag. I had seen the receipt for it on the kitchen counter when I visited last Christmas. $12,000. Justin Brittany called out, not even looking at me. "We need to go. The reservation at Le Bernardin is in 15 minutes, and I am not waiting for valet." She stopped. She turned her head and looked at me. Her nose wrinkled in disgust. "Oh, Garrett," she said. "You are still here." "Brittany." "Dad was just leaving," Justin said quickly, standing up and grabbing his car keys. "Good," Brittany said, waving her hand in front of her face. "Because honestly, Garrett, you smell like old oil and mothballs. It is really unprofessional. We have clients coming in later. You can't just wander in here looking like a homeless person. It reflects badly on the brand." She looked at Justin. "Did you get the signature?" she asked. "We are working on it," Justin said, winking at her. "Dad is thinking about the offer." "Right, Dad." I looked at the Hermes bag. I looked at the Rolex. Then I looked at the checkbook sitting on Justin's desk. The checkbook that was linked to the account where he had dumped my stolen retirement money. I stood up straight. I stopped trembling. I wiped the fake tear from my cheek. "You are right, Justin," I said. My voice was strong now, clear. "I need to think about my assets. I need to think very carefully about who gets what before I die." Justin didn't notice the change in my tone. He was too busy admiring his wife's new bag. "Great, take the weekend," Justin said dismissively. "But bring the papers Monday. And Dad, don't die before then, okay? The probate taxes would be a nightmare." He laughed. He actually laughed. I walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the handle. "I won't die, Justin," I said. "I plan on living for a very long time." I stepped out of the office. The heavy glass door clicked shut behind me, sealing them in their aquarium of greed. I walked past the receptionist, who looked at me with pity. She didn't know, nobody knew. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the executioner, and I had just given them their last meal request, and they had spit in it. I pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 20 years. "Harlan, it is Garrett." "Yes." "I need a favor." "No, not a small one. I need to buy a bank." "Well, not the whole bank. Just the debt portfolio of a specific real estate company." "Yes. Hawthorne and Associates. I want to own every cent he owes." I walked down the street, the sun shining on my face. I didn't need $5,000. I had $4.8 million, and I was about to spend every penny of it to teach my son a lesson that money couldn't buy. The test was over. The war had begun. And unlike Justin, I never entered a fight I couldn't win. The leather seats of Justin's BMW were soft, but my body felt stiff, as if I were being transported in a hearse. We had been driving for 40 minutes, moving further and further away from the city center, past the suburbs, and into a rundown industrial district that I used to deliver steel to back in the 80s. The scenery outside the window was bleak. Abandoned warehouses, chain-link fences topped with razor wire, and liquor stores with bars on the windows. "So this is the place," Justin said, his voice overly cheerful. He tapped the steering wheel to the beat of the radio. "Sunnyvale Senior Living. It is a hidden gem, Dad. Really, they focus on community, not just fancy chandeliers." He pulled into a parking lot that was full of potholes. The building in front of us was a long, single-story concrete block that looked more like a minimum security prison than a home. The sign out front was missing the letter V, so it read, Sunny Ale. The grass was yellow and dead, and a single lonely wheelchair sat rusted near the front entrance. It looks quiet, I said, forcing the words out. Peaceful, Justin corrected me. He parked the car next to a dumpster that smelled vaguely of rotting food. That is the word you are looking for. Peaceful. You need peace, right, after all those years in the noisy factory? He got out and rushed to open my door. It was a performance. He wanted to feel like the good son, the caring son, even as he walked me to the gallows. We walked through the sliding glass doors. The smell hit me instantly. It was a thick, suffocating cocktail of industrial bleach, boiled cabbage, and stale urine. It was the smell of a place where people come to wait for the end. A man in a wrinkled polyester suit hurried out from behind the reception desk. He had a thin mustache and eyes that darted around like a nervous rat. Mr. Hawthorne. Welcome, welcome, the man said, extending a sweaty hand to Justin, completely ignoring me. I am Mr. Henderson, the facility director. I am so glad you could make it. This is my father, Garrett, Justin said, gesturing to me vaguely. He is thinking about making a transition. We want to see the accessible units. Mr. Henderson finally looked at me. His eyes swept over my old flannel suit, assessing my value. He didn't see a person. He saw a monthly check from the government. Of course, Garrett. Welcome to Sunnyvale. You are going to love it here. We are like one big family. He led us down a long hallway. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed loudly, flickering every few seconds. The linoleum floor was scuffed and stained. As we walked, I looked into the rooms. They were tiny, dark spaces. In one room, an elderly woman was sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall, rocking back and forth. In another, a man was calling out a name over and over, but no one came. Here is our recreation center, Mr. Henderson said, sweeping his arm toward a room with a few folding chairs and a television that was turned off. We have bingo on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It is a riot. The residents love it. I looked at the 3 people in the room. 2 were asleep in their wheelchairs, their heads slumped forward. The third was staring out the window at a brick wall. Justin nodded enthusiastically. See, Dad, activities. You always said you were bored at home. Here, you will have a social life. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. A social life. He was talking about these abandoned souls as if they were members of a country club. He was trying to sell me a coffin and telling me it was a luxury suite. Mr. Henderson led us to the end of the hall. And here is one of our available double occupancy rooms, he said, unlocking a heavy door. The room was the size of a walk-in closet. There were 2 narrow beds separated by a thin curtain. On one bed, a skeletal man was hooked up to an oxygen tank, the machine wheezing rhythmically. The other bed was stripped bare, the mattress covered in crinkled plastic. It is cozy, isn't it? Justin said, avoiding my eyes. He walked over to the window, which looked out onto an alleyway filled with trash cans. Look at the natural light. I stood in the doorway. I couldn't move. My feet felt heavy, like they were encased in the concrete I used to pour. This was it. This was where my son wanted to put me. This was the reward for 30 years of sacrifice. A plastic mattress next to a dying stranger. I need to use the restroom, I lied. My voice was tight. Of course, Mr. Henderson said, pointing down the hall. Just past the nurse's station. I walked away, my footsteps heavy, but I didn't go to the restroom. I stopped just around the corner, pressing my back against the cold wall. I needed to hear what they said when I wasn't there. I needed to know the depth of the betrayal. I heard Justin's voice, low and sharp. The cheerful tone was gone. Look, Henderson, let's cut the crap. What is the rock-bottom price? I leaned closer. Well, Mr. Hawthorne Henderson replied, his voice oily. For a semi-private room like that with basic care, we can do $2,000 a month. But that doesn't include laundry service or premium meals. Skip the premium meals, Justin said quickly. He barely eats. And laundry. He can wash his own clothes in the sink. I need the economy package, the absolute bare minimum. There was a pause. I could hear the sound of papers shuffling. And about the cognitive status, Henderson asked. Justin lowered his voice even more, but in the quiet hallway it sounded like a scream. He is gone, Henderson. Senile. He imagines things. If he tells you he has money or that he owns property, just ignore him. He gets confused. Sometimes he gets aggressive about it. I see, Henderson said. That makes things easier. We have a secure wing if he becomes difficult. We can sedate him if necessary. Perfect, Justin said. Just keep him here. I need him out of his house by Monday. I have buyers coming to view the property, and I can't have him wandering around scaring them off. Just lock him in, give him his pills, and make sure he doesn't call anyone. I will handle the payments directly from his pension. I slid down the wall until I was crouching on the floor. The smell of urine seemed stronger now, choking me. He wasn't just putting me in a home. He was putting me in a prison. He was telling them I was crazy so that no one would believe me when I said I had rights. He was stripping me of my voice, my freedom, and my sanity. He was going to drug me to keep me quiet while he sold the house I built with my own hands. I felt the lottery ticket in my pocket. It felt hot like a burning coal. I could walk back in there right now. I could pull out the ticket and slap Justin across the face with it. I could buy this entire miserable building and fire Henderson on the spot. But that would be too easy. That would be a mercy. No. I needed him to think he had won. I needed him to sign those papers. I needed him to commit the crime fully. I stood up. I straightened my jacket. I took a deep breath, inhaling the foul air of my potential tomb. I forced a confused, slightly vacant expression onto my face. I shuffled back to the room. Justin and Henderson were shaking hands. "Did you find it okay, Dad?" Justin asked, smiling that shark smile. I looked at him. I looked at the plastic mattress. "Yes," I said softly, letting a tremor enter my voice. It is nice, Justin. The man in the other bed seems quiet." Justin let out a breath of relief. He clapped me on the shoulder. "See, I knew you would like it. It is for the best, Dad. You will be safe here. No more worrying about bills or fixing the roof. We will get you moved in next week." "Next week," I repeated. I looked at Henderson. Do you have a phone I can use?" I asked innocently. "Sometimes I like to call the weather hotline." Henderson exchanged a glance with Justin. A glance that said, "Gee, he is crazy." "There is a payphone in the lobby," Mr. Hawthorne, Henderson said dismissively. "But you won't need it. We have a television." I nodded. I lowered my head submissively. "Okay," I said. "Thank you." We walked back to the car. Justin was whistling now. He was happy. He had found a place to dump his garbage. As we drove away, I watched Sunnyvale disappear in the rearview mirror. Justin thought he was leaving his father there. He didn't know he was driving home with a monster with $4.8 million and a heart that had just turned to solid steel. He wanted me to be helpless. He wanted me to be a senile old man. Fine. I would play the part. I would be the best actor he had ever seen. Until the curtain fell and the lights went out on him forever. I paid the taxi driver and stood on the sidewalk in front of my house. My home. The place where I had raised a family, fixed skinned knees, and held my wife's hand as she took her last breath. But as I looked at it now, it didn't feel like mine anymore. There were 3 cars parked in my driveway, shiny, expensive luxury sedans that looked out of place on my modest street. And my front door, the solid oak door I painted red every 2 years, because Sarah loved the color was standing wide open. I had not invited anyone. I had not given anyone a key except Justin. A cold knot formed in my stomach. It was the same feeling I used to get when I walked the factory floor at night, sensing that a machine was about to malfunction. I walked up the driveway, my old boots crunching on the gravel. I didn't run. I moved with the slow, deliberate anger of a man who is done being pushed around. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard voices coming from inside. Laughter, the clicking of high heels on the hardwood floors. I stepped into the foyer. The house smelled different. It didn't smell like my coffee or old books anymore. It smelled of strangers and expensive perfume. In the living room, I saw them. Brittany was standing in the center of the room, surrounded by 4 people in sharp suits holding clipboards. Real estate agents. She was pointing at the fireplace, the one I had built stone by stone with my own hands. "So, obviously this entire wall has to go," Brittany was saying, waving her hand dismissively. "We want to open this space up, create a flow. It is very dark and dated right now. We are thinking of knocking out the partition to the kitchen and putting in a wet bar. A modern industrial look is very in right now." One of the agents, a tall man with slicked back hair, nodded enthusiastically. "Excellent vision, Mrs. Hawthorne. The open concept will add at least $50,000 to the asking price." "And what about the furniture?" Brittany laughed. It was a harsh metallic sound. "Oh, don't worry about this junk. It is all going to the dump. We are hiring a junk removal service on Monday. It is just old, dusty clutter." She walked over to the mantel. My heart stopped. On that mantel sat the most precious things I owned. The urn containing Sarah's ashes, and next to it, a framed photograph of us on our 40th anniversary standing in the garden she loved so much. Brittany picked up the photo frame. She held it with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "See," Brittany said, turning the photo toward the agents. "Just sentimental garbage. It depresses the whole vibe of the room. We need to stage it with abstract art. Something neutral." The agent reached out to take the photo from her. I moved. I didn't think. I just moved. I crossed the room in 3 long strides. The rage that had been simmering in my gut since the nursing home finally boiled over. "Get your hands off her," I growled. The room went silent. The agent froze his hand mid-air. Brittany spun around, nearly dropping the frame. "Garrett," she gasped. Her eyes went wide, not with guilt, but with annoyance. "What are you doing here?" Justin said. "He was taking you out for the afternoon." I ignored her question. I snatched the photo frame from her hand. I held it against my chest, shielding Sarah's smile from their greedy eyes. "Get out," I said. My voice was low, shaking with the effort to not scream. "Get out of my house, all of you." Brittany straightened her dress. She put her hands on her hips and sighed, rolling her eyes at the agents as if to say, "See what I have to deal with, Garrett." "Don't be dramatic," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "These are top brokers from the city. They are doing us a favor by doing a preliminary walkthrough. We are just trying to maximize the value of the asset." The asset. That is what my life was to her. An asset to be maximized. "I am not selling," I said, stepping closer to her. "I never said I was selling. This is my house. My name is on the deed, and you are trespassing." Brittany laughed again. She looked at the agents and shook her head. "I am so sorry, everyone. My father-in-law is, well, he is having a bit of an episode. He is confused. We are moving him into a facility next week for his own safety." She turned back to me, her face hardening. She stepped into my personal space, the smell of her perfume choking me. "Cut the act, Garrett. You saw the nursing home today. You know where you are going. You are broke. You are sick. You can't live here alone. Justin is doing everything to save you from rotting in this dusty old museum." She pointed a manicured finger at the urn on the mantel. And honestly, it is creepy. Keeping ashes in the living room, it is morbid. When we renovate, that thing goes into storage. Or you can take it to your little room at Sunnyvale. That thing. A red haze filled my vision. I felt the muscles in my neck tighten. I looked at the agents. "If you are not out of my house in 10 seconds. I roared, my voice shaking the walls. "I am calling the police and reporting a break-in. And I have a shotgun in the closet that I haven't cleaned in a while, but I am sure it still works." The agents didn't need to be told twice. The mention of the police and a shotgun broke through their professional veneer. They scrambled toward the door, muttering apologies and clutching their clipboards. "Mr. Hawthorne, we didn't know. We were told the owner was incapacitated," one of them stammered as he fled. In seconds, the room was empty, except for Brittany. She stood there, her face red with embarrassment and fury. She looked at the door where the agents had disappeared, then turned her venomous glare back to me. "You crazy old fool," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you just did? Those were potential buyers. You just cost us thousands." "Get out, Brittany," I said, pointing to the door. She grabbed her Hermes bag from the sofa. She marched to the door, her heels clicking angrily on the floor. She stopped at the threshold and turned back. Her eyes were cold, dead things. "You think you won something today," she spat. "You won nothing. Monday is coming, Garrett. You will sign those papers and you will go to that nursing home. And if you fight us, Justin will declare you mentally incompetent. We will have you committed. And then I will personally come back here, throw every single piece of your wife's trash into a dumpster, and light a match." She slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood in the silence of the living room. My chest was heaving. I looked down at the photo in my hands. Sarah was smiling up at me, frozen in a moment of time when we were happy, when we thought we had raised a good son. I walked over to the door and locked it. Then I engaged the deadbolt. Then I dragged a heavy wooden chair and wedged it under the handle. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from adrenaline. Brittany was right about one thing. Monday was coming. But she was wrong about who would be celebrating. She thought she could threaten to burn my memories. She thought she could erase my existence. I walked to the phone. I had one more call to make before Monday. Harlan had bought the debt. Now I needed to buy the security. I looked at the urn on the mantel. "Don't worry, Sarah," I whispered. "I am not going anywhere, and neither are you." I sat down in my armchair, the one facing the door. I wasn't going to sleep tonight. I was going to wait. They had invaded my sanctuary. They had insulted my wife. They had threatened my freedom. The time for mercy was over. I wasn't just going to defeat them. I was going to dismantle them piece by piece until they understood exactly what it felt like to be powerless. I touched the pocket where the lottery ticket sat. "Come on Monday," I said to the empty room. "Let's see who burns first." The cigar smoke in Harlan's study was thick enough to chew on. It smelled of expensive tobacco and old leather, a scent that reminded me of the days when business was done with a handshake and a glass of scotch, not with emails and lawyers. Harlan sat behind his desk, a massive piece of oak that looked like it had been carved from the hull of a pirate ship. He was 80 years old, but his eyes were as sharp as broken glass. They called him the Fox of Wall Street for a reason. He had retired 10 years ago, but everyone knew he still held the strings to half the city's underground finance. Garrett Harlan rasped, his voice sounding like gravel in a mixer. "You look like hell. I heard you were moving into a nursing home. Or was that just a rumor started by that ambitious son of yours? News travels fast," I said, taking the seat opposite him. I didn't smile. I didn't have the energy for small talk. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the lottery ticket. I smoothed it out on the desk right next to his crystal ashtray. "I am not going to a nursing home, Harlan, and I am not selling my house." Harlan glanced at the ticket. Then he looked closer. He picked up his reading glasses, perched them on his nose, and leaned in. He studied the numbers for a long time. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. "Well," Harlan said softly, leaning back. 4.8 million. That is a lot of nursing home fees. Why are you showing me this? You should be at the lottery commission, not in my dusty office. I don't want the money, Harlan, I said. He raised an eyebrow. I want to buy something with it. Something specific. Harlan took a sip of his scotch. I am listening. I want to buy my son, I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I want to buy his life. Every debt he has, every loan, every mortgage. I want to own him. Harlan stared at me. He didn't laugh. He didn't ask if I was crazy. He saw the look in my eyes. It was the look of a man who had been pushed past the edge of reason. He is in trouble, isn't he? Harlan asked. He tried to force me to sell my house today, I said. He tried to put me away to get his hands on the equity. He is desperate. I need to know why, and I need to control the outcome. Harlan nodded slowly. He picked up his phone. He didn't dial a number. He just pressed a speed dial button. Get me everything on Justin Hawthorne, he barked into the receiver. Personal business off the books. I don't care if you have to hack the Pentagon. I want his financial soul on my desk in 10 minutes. He hung up and poured me a glass of scotch. We sat in silence. I drank the burning liquid, feeling it settle in my empty stomach. 10 minutes later, a fax machine in the corner hissed to life. Harlan walked over and tore off the pages. He read them standing up. As he read, his expression changed. The amused smirk vanished. His jaw tightened. He flipped to the second page, then the third. Garrett, he said, his voice serious. You need to see this. He tossed the papers onto the desk. I picked them up. I saw numbers. Red numbers. Lots of them. He is over-leveraged on 3 properties, Harlan explained, pointing a finger at the columns. He owes the bank $2 million. But that is standard for a developer. That is not the problem. He flipped the page to a grainy photocopy of a ledger. This is the problem, Harlan said. I looked at the names on the ledger. They weren't banks. They were names like Jimmy the Saint and the Russian, and next to them were interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. 10% a week. He has been gambling, Garrett, Harlan said quietly. Sports betting. High-stakes poker. He has lost big. And he borrowed from the wrong people to cover his losses. I felt the blood drain from my face. My son wasn't just a bad businessman. He was a degenerate gambler. How much, I asked. He owes the Sharks $300,000, Harlan said, and the payment is due on Monday. Monday. The same day he demanded I sign the house papers. He plans to use your house to pay them off. Harlan continued. The equity in your home is exactly $350,000. He is not trying to expand his business, Garrett. He is trying to save his kneecaps, maybe his life. I sat back, stunned. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He was going to throw his own father onto the street, lock me away in a hellhole, just to clean up his own mess. He didn't come to me for help. He didn't confess. He decided to sacrifice me to save himself. If he doesn't pay on Monday, Harlan said, lighting another cigar, these guys don't sue. They break things. People. Houses. Can we buy it? I asked. Harlan looked at me through the smoke. The bank debt. Easy. The shark debt, that is trickier. But I know people. I can negotiate a buyout. We can set up a shell company. Let's call it Phoenix Holdings. We pay off the sharks, we buy the banknotes. By Monday morning, Justin won't owe the bank and he won't owe the mob. He will owe you. Do it, I said. Are you sure? Harlan asked. Once we do this, there is no going back. You will hold the axe over his neck. If you swing it, you destroy him. I looked at the papers. I looked at the list of debts my son had accumulated while pretending to be a success. I thought about the way he looked at me at the dinner table, like I was nothing. He was willing to bury me to save himself, I said. He made his choice. Now I am making mine. I stood up. Set up the company, Harlan. Use the lottery ticket as collateral for the bridge loan until the cash comes through. I want everything signed and sealed by Sunday night. When he wakes up on Monday, I want to be the only thing standing between him and ruin. Harlan grinned. It was a wolfish grin. I always liked you, Garrett. You play the long game. I walked out of Harlan's office. The city lights were blinking on. I wasn't just a retired factory worker anymore. I was Phoenix Holdings. I was the invisible hand that was about to squeeze the life out of my son's deception. He thought he was fighting for money. He didn't know he was fighting for his soul. And I was coming to collect. Monday couldn't come fast enough. I walked home, the cool night air fueling the fire in my belly. I wasn't afraid of the loan sharks. I wasn't afraid of the banks. I was only afraid of what I was becoming. But then I remembered the nursing home. I remembered the smell of urine and despair, and I knew I would become whatever I had to be to survive. Sunday afternoon arrived with a gray, suffocating stillness. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of black coffee cooling in front of me. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a battlefield before the first shot is fired. I had spent the morning setting the stage. I dusted the table. I put out a plate of stale cookies. I even made sure my hands looked suitably trembling when I poured the milk. At 1 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I watched them on the new monitor I had installed in the hallway cabinet. Justin was smoothing his hair, checking his reflection in the glass. Brittany was checking her teeth for lipstick. They looked like sharks in Sunday best. I opened the door, leaning heavily on my cane. A cane I didn't need, but one that completed the picture of the frail, confused old man they wanted me to be. "Hi, Dad," Justin said. His voice was soft, dripping with a synthetic warmth that made my skin crawl. He held up a white bakery box. "We brought blueberry muffins, your favorite." Brittany smiled. It was a tight, practiced smile. "We wanted to apologize for yesterday, Garrett," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "The open house, the misunderstanding about the nursing home. We were just stressed. We want a fresh start." I let them in. I shuffled to the kitchen, letting my feet drag on the floor. "It is okay," I mumbled, keeping my head down. "I know you mean well. I am just tired." Justin exchanged a look with Brittany, a look of victory. They thought I had broken. They thought the fear of the nursing home had finally brought me to heel. We sat at the kitchen table. Justin placed the muffins in the center, but he didn't offer me one. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. It was thick, at least 50 pages, bound with a heavy clip. "Dad," Justin said, placing the stack in front of me. "We stayed up all night thinking about how to protect you. We realized that selling the house immediately might be too emotional for you, so we came up with a better plan." He tapped the top page. "This is a comprehensive life insurance and asset protection package," he explained. "It basically puts everything in a trust. You stay in the house, but the trust manages the bills. It secures your medical care, everything. You just sign and you never have to worry about money again." Brittany pushed a pen toward me. A heavy, expensive Mont Blanc pen. "Just sign at the sticky notes, Garrett," she said sweetly. We highlighted everything to make it easy. I reached for the pen. My hand shook. I made sure it shook violently enough that I couldn't grip it properly. I need my glasses," I said. I reached into my pocket. But I didn't just pull out my reading glasses. I pulled out a small, thick magnifying glass that Harlan had given me the night before. But the real weapon was clipped to my shirt pocket. A pen that wasn't a pen. It was a high-definition camera and microphone recording every word, every lie, every attempt to defraud a senior citizen. I leaned over the documents. Justin shifted in his seat. "Dad, you don't need to read the fine print," he said quickly. "It is just standard legal jargon, boilerplate stuff." I ignored him. I flipped past the first page, which was indeed a generic insurance summary. I turned to the middle of the stack where the pages were stapled tightly together. I moved the magnifying glass slowly. I saw the words. Page 12. Quitclaim deed. Transfer of property located at 45 Elm Street to Justin Hawthorne for the sum of $1. I turned another page. Page 15. Durable power of attorney. Granting Justin Hawthorne full control over all financial and medical decisions due to the grantor's permanent cognitive incapacity. Incapacity. He wasn't just stealing the house. He was legally declaring me brain dead. If I signed this, he could throw me in that hole at Sunnyvale the same afternoon, and I wouldn't even have the legal standing to hire a lawyer to get me out. I would be a ghost in my own life. I looked up. Justin was watching me, sweat beading on his upper lip. "Is everything okay, Dad?" he asked. "The ink is drying." I looked at the document again. Then I looked at my coffee cup. It was full. It was hot. And it was sitting right next to the stack of papers. This is a lot of paper, Justin," I stammered. "My eyes. They aren't what they used to be." I reached for the pen again. But as I did, my arm spasmed. It was a beautiful, calculated spasm. My hand lashed out and struck the coffee mug hard. "Oh no," I cried out. The dark liquid exploded across the table. It soaked into the white tablecloth, but more importantly, it washed over the documents like a tidal wave. The brown sludge seeped instantly into the expensive bond paper, turning the quitclaim deed and the certificate of incapacity into a soggy, dripping mess. "Dad!" Justin screamed. He jumped up, knocking his chair over. "What are you doing?" Brittany shrieked, jumping back to avoid the splash on her dress. "You clumsy old idiot," she yelled, forgetting her sweet act entirely. "Look what you did." I stood up, trembling, clutching a napkin. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." I wailed, dabbing ineffectually at the ruin. "My hand. It just slipped. I am so clumsy." Justin grabbed the sodden pile of papers. He tried to shake them off, but they were tearing under their own weight. The ink was running. The signatures' lines were dissolved. This is ruined," Justin hissed. His face was purple. The vein in his forehead was throbbing dangerously. "Do you know how much the lawyer charged to draft this rush order on a Sunday? I can sign it anyway," I offered, reaching for the wet pulp. "No," Justin shouted. He pulled it away. "You can't sign this. The bank won't accept a coffee-stained legal document. It has to be pristine." He threw the wet papers into the trash can with a violence that made me flinch. He ran his hands through his hair, pacing the small kitchen like a caged animal. "We have to reprint," he muttered to himself. "The lawyer's office is closed. I have to go to Kinko's. I have to reformat everything." He looked at the clock. It was 2 p.m. "We don't have time," Brittany said, checking her watch. "The notary leaves at 4. Justin turned to me. His eyes were wild. He looked like a man who was watching the water rise around his neck. "Dad, listen to me," he said, gripping my shoulders. His fingers dug in hard, painful. "I am going to go print these again. I will be back tomorrow morning. First thing, 8 a.m. sharp. Do not drink coffee. Do not touch anything. Just sit here and wait for me." "Do you understand tomorrow?" I asked innocently. "But I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow." "Cancel it," Justin roared. "Cancel everything. You are signing these papers tomorrow morning if I have to guide your hand myself." He grabbed his briefcase. "Come on, Brittany. We have to go." They stormed out of the house without another word. No goodbye. No hug. just the slamming of the front door that shook the pictures on the wall. I walked to the window. I parted the curtains just a sliver. I saw them get into the BMW. Justin didn't start the car immediately. He slammed his fists against the steering wheel. Once, twice, 3 times. I could see him screaming, his face contorted in a mask of pure terror. Through the hidden microphone I had planted near the front porch earlier, the audio feed crackled in my earpiece. "Damn it," I heard Justin scream inside his car. "That useless old man. Tomorrow is the deadline, Brittany." The Russian said, "Noon. If I don't have the deed by noon, they are going to break my legs. Or worse." "I can't believe he spilled the coffee." Brittany's voice whined. "He is losing it, Justin. He is totally gone." "He better not be gone until he signs," Justin growled. The engine roared to life. "We have one more chance, tomorrow morning. If he messes up again, I swear to God I will forge the signature myself and deal with the fallout later." The car screeched out of the driveway, leaving a trail of black rubber on the asphalt. I watched them disappear down the street. I slowly took the earpiece out of my ear. I walked back to the kitchen table. I picked up the Mont Blanc pen they had left behind in their panic. I twirled it between my fingers. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. It was steady as a surgeon's. I looked at the trash can where the soggy papers lay. The trap had been sprung, but not the one they intended. They thought they had until tomorrow. They thought the only enemy was time. They didn't know that Phoenix Holdings had already scheduled a meeting with their creditors for 9 a.m. I cleaned up the coffee spill. I hummed a little tune. It was an old song Sarah used to like. Stormy weather. Tomorrow Justin would come for my house, but he would find something very different waiting for him. He would find his landlord, his banker, and his judge. I poured myself another cup of coffee. I held it with both hands, enjoying the warmth. It was the best cup of coffee I had ever tasted, because it tasted like justice. Monday morning arrived with the precision of a guillotine blade. I was sitting in Harlan's office watching a bank of monitors that displayed a live feed from inside Hawthorne Real Estate. Harlan had called in a favor from a security firm that installed Justin's system years ago, giving us a front-row seat to the execution. On the screen, Justin looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His tie was crooked, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was pacing the length of his office floor, chewing on his fingernails. He was waiting for me. He was waiting for his father to shuffle in with the reprinted documents, ready to sign away his life. But I wasn't coming. Instead, a bike messenger walked through the glass doors at exactly 9 o'clock. I watched as the messenger handed Justin a thick red envelope. Justin frowned. He wasn't expecting mail. He was expecting a confused old man. He ripped the envelope open. I leaned forward in my chair. This was the moment. Justin pulled out the letter. It was on heavy cream-colored stationery with the logo of Phoenix Holdings embossed in gold at the top. I saw his eyes scan the first line. Then they widened. Then his face went the color of ash. He dropped into his leather chair as if his strings had been cut. He read the letter again, his hands shaking so badly, the paper rattled. "What is it?" Harlan asked, sipping his morning coffee. "It is the notice of acceleration," I said, not taking my eyes off the screen. "Phoenix Holdings has just informed him that we have purchased all his debt. The bank loans, the construction lines of credit, and most importantly, the $300,000 he owes to the underground lenders." On the screen, Justin grabbed his phone. He dialed a number frantically. It was his banker. I could hear his voice through the audio tap Harlan had set up. "Bob, it is Justin. Listen, I just got a letter from some company called Phoenix Holdings. They say they bought my note. What is going on? You can't just sell my debt without telling me." There was a pause as the banker spoke on the other end. Justin's face twisted in panic. "What do you mean it is standard procedure?" Justin screamed into the phone. They are demanding full repayment immediately. $2.3 million, Bob. You have to stop this. I have a liquidity event happening today. I am getting the house. I just need 24 hours. He listened for another moment. Then he slammed the phone down so hard I thought it would crack. They hung up on him, I said quietly. Justin stood up. He ran his hands through his hair, pulling at the roots. He walked to the window and looked out. He was looking for my truck. He was looking for his savior, but the street was empty. Suddenly his cell phone rang. Justin jumped. He looked at the screen and paled even further. It wasn't the bank. It was Brittany. He answered it on speakerphone. Justin. Brittany's shrill voice cut through the air. Why are the credit cards declined? I am at the caterer for the charity gala. The card was rejected. They said the account is frozen. It is a mistake, babe, Justin stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. The bank is doing an audit. Just use your personal card. My personal card is maxed out because you told me to put the Dubai tickets on it, she yelled. Fix this, Justin. Now. You promised me everything was under control. I will fix it, Justin shouted back. Just give me an hour. Dad is coming. Once he signs the investors release the funds, just stall them. He hung up. He was hyperventilating now. He loosened his tie, gasping for air. Then he made the call I had been waiting for. He scrolled through his contacts and pressed the button for Richard. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Finally, a voice picked up. But it wasn't the warm, fatherly voice Richard used at the dinner party. It was annoyed. Distant. Justin. I am in the first-class lounge. We are boarding in 10 minutes. What is it, Richard? Thank God. Justin gasped. Listen, I have a situation. A temporary cash flow issue. A clerical error at the bank has frozen my accounts. I need a bridge loan, just for 48 hours. There was silence on the other end. How much? Richard asked coldly. 50,000, Justin said. No, wait. I need 100, just to keep the wolves away until the house transfer clears. 100,000, Richard laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound. Justin, I thought you were a successful businessman, asking your father-in-law for money while he is on vacation. It is very tacky. But Richard I paid for the trip, Justin pleaded. The tickets alone were 20 grand. I did that for you. That was a gift, Richard snapped. You don't ask for a refund on a gift. It shows a lack of class. Look, sort out your own mess. If you can't manage a simple cash flow problem, maybe Brittany made a mistake marrying you. Click. Justin stared at the phone. The betrayal was absolute. The man he had prioritized over his own flesh and blood had just left him to drown without throwing a life preserver. Justin threw the phone across the room. It smashed into the wall, cracking the screen. He let out a primal scream of frustration, kicking his expensive mahogany desk. Damn you, he roared. Damn all of you. He collapsed onto the floor, putting his head in his hands. He was crying now. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of terrified self-pity. I watched him with a cold detachment. I remembered when he was 5 years old and scraped his knee. I had picked him up, wiped away his tears, and bought him ice cream. I had fixed it. But I couldn't fix this. I wouldn't fix this. Suddenly, the intercom on his desk buzzed. Mr. Hawthorne. His secretary's voice came through, trembling. There are 2 men in the lobby. They say they are from Phoenix Holdings. They want to inspect the collateral. They say if they don't get a payment by noon, they are taking the company cars and tagging the office equipment for auction. Justin scrambled to his feet. He looked at the clock on the wall. It was 11:15. Tell them to wait, he screamed at the intercom. Tell them I am in a meeting. Call security. He began to pace again, faster this time. He was muttering to himself. He is not coming. The old man is not coming. He forgot. Or he died. It doesn't matter. I am dead. I am dead. He stopped. His eyes fell on the stack of papers on his desk. The reprinted deed. The reprinted power of attorney. The ones he had stayed up all night formatting after the coffee incident. He looked at the papers. Then he looked at the door. Then he looked at a glass of water on his desk. He walked over to the desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out an old document. It was a birthday card I had sent him last year. Love, Dad. He stared at my signature. I saw the gears turning in his head. I saw the moment desperation turned into criminality. He sat down. He pulled out a piece of tracing paper from his drafting supplies. He laid it over the birthday card. "Don't do it, Justin," I whispered to the screen, though he couldn't hear me. "Don't cross that line." But he didn't stop. His hand was shaking, but he forced it to steady. He traced my signature carefully. Then he placed the tracing paper over the quitclaim deed. He pressed down hard with a ballpoint pen, creating an indentation on the legal document. He removed the tracing paper. He picked up a blue ink pen. He took a deep breath. He looked at the door one last time as if checking for witnesses. Then he signed my name. Garrett Hawthorne. He did it again on the power of attorney, and again on the bank transfer authorization. He finished. He sat back, sweating profusely. He looked at the forged signatures. They looked perfect. He grabbed the notary stamp from his drawer. It was his own stamp. He was a licensed notary. He stamped the documents. There he whispered, his voice cracking. "It is done." He gave it to me. He wanted me to have it. He was rationalizing the felony in real time. He convinced himself that stealing my home was actually an act of obedience. He gathered the papers. He grabbed his car keys. "I am going to the bank," he said to the empty room. "I am saving this company." He ran out of the office, leaving the Phoenix Holdings reps in the lobby. He slipped out the back exit. I turned to Harlan. "He did it," I said. Harlan nodded, extinguishing his cigar. "He just handed us the nail for his coffin," Harlan said. "Forgery, fraud, elder abuse. That is 10 to 15 years in state prison." I stood up. I felt heavy, tired. "Call the police, Harlan. Tell them a fraud is in progress at First National Bank. Tell them to meet us there." I walked to the door. "And Harlan," I asked. "Yeah. Make sure the Phoenix Holdings reps tow his car. I don't want him having a getaway vehicle when the handcuffs come out." I walked out into the sunlight. The game was over. Justin had played his final card, and it was a fake. Now he was going to learn that in the real world, you can't trace your way out of consequences. I was going to the bank, not to save him, but to witness the fall. The tinted windows of Harlan's Lincoln town car created a dark, safe cocoon as we parked 3 houses down from my own driveway. The engine was off. The only sound was the soft whir of the portable surveillance unit Harlan had set up on the leather seat between us. It was a high-definition tablet connected to the cameras I had hidden in the crown molding of my living room and the smoke detector in the kitchen. We watched in silence as Justin's BMW pulled up to the curb. He was not alone. A small, nervous-looking man in an ill-fitting brown suit climbed out of the passenger side. He was clutching a heavy leather bag to his chest like a shield. "That is Silas Thorne," Harlan whispered, recognizing the man immediately. He used to be a legitimate notary until he got caught verifying signatures for dead people back in the 90s. Now he works for cash, no questions asked. I watched my son lead this stranger up the walkway of the home I had built. Justin fumbled with his keys. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped them twice on the concrete steps. I could see the sweat staining the back of his shirt, even though the morning air was cool. He looked like a man who was running from a fire only to realize he was carrying the gasoline. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. I flinched. Even though I was watching on a screen, it felt like a physical violation. They stepped inside and the feed switched to the interior cameras. The living room looked peaceful. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was the sanctuary of my life with Sarah, and now my son was turning it into a crime scene. "Hurry up!" I heard Justin's voice crackle through the speakers. He sounded breathless, manic. "We don't have much time. The old man could come back from the doctor any minute." Thorne looked around the room, his eyes darting to the expensive electronics, assessing the value of the house. "You said he was bedridden," Thorne said, his voice nasally and irritating. "You said he was in the back room and couldn't come to the office." "Plans changed," Justin snapped, throwing his briefcase onto the kitchen table. "He is out. But he agreed to this. He wants this. He forgot to sign before he left. I am just helping him finish the paperwork." Thorne laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. "Save the story for the judge, kid. I don't care if he agreed or not. I care about the fee. You said double the usual rate if the signatory is absent." Justin reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the table. "There. $2,000. Cash. Now get the stamp out." I watched from the car, my heart hammering a painful rhythm against my ribs. I wanted to open the door. I wanted to run down the street, burst into the house and shake him. I wanted to scream, "Justin, stop. Don't do this. Once you do this, there is no going back." I gripped the door handle of the car. My knuckles turned white. "Easy," Garrett Harlan said, placing a heavy hand on my arm. His voice was calm, cold. "Let him finish. If you stop him now, he is just a desperate kid making a mistake. If you let him stamp that paper, he is a felon who can never hurt you again. You have to let the trap snap shut." I forced myself to let go of the handle. I sat back, feeling tears prick the corners of my eyes. I was watching the funeral of my relationship with my son. On the screen, Justin was laying out the documents. The deed, the power of attorney, the bank transfer authorizations. He picked up a pen. He didn't even hesitate this time. He didn't use tracing paper. He had practiced enough. He bent over the table right where we had eaten breakfast every Sunday for 30 years. He signed my name. Garrett Hawthorne. He did it with a flourish, a perfect imitation of the signature I had used on his report cards, his college applications, his first car loan. "He is good," Harlan muttered. "Too good. He has been practicing that for a while." Justin finished the signatures. He pushed the papers toward Thorne. "Your turn," Justin said. Thorne opened his bag. He pulled out an ink pad and a heavy notary stamp. He also pulled out a small black kit. "Thumbprint," Thorne said. "State law requires a thumbprint for property transfers involving seniors." Justin froze. I don't have his thumb, obviously," Justin hissed. Thorne shrugged. "Use yours. Smudge it a little. Nobody checks the prints unless there is a forensic audit. And if there is a forensic audit, I will be in Mexico by then." Justin looked at his own thumb. He looked at the ink pad. I watched him press his thumb into the black ink. I watched him press it onto the paper right next to my forged signature. He twisted his finger, slightly blurring the ridges, trying to hide his identity while stealing mine. It was a grotesque act. It wasn't just fraud. It was a rejection of his own identity. He was using the very blood and DNA I gave him to erase me. Thorne picked up his stamp. He exhaled sharply on the rubber seal, then pressed it down onto the paper with a heavy final thud. Thump. The sound echoed through the car speakers. Thump, thump. 3 documents, 3 strikes. "There," Thorne said, capping his ink pad. "Legally witnessed and notarized." As far as the state of Pennsylvania is concerned, Garrett Hawthorne signed these papers in my presence of sound mind and body. Congratulations, kid. You just stole a house. Justin grabbed the papers. He held them up to the light. A look of pure, unadulterated relief washed over his face. He laughed. It was a high, hysterical giggle that sounded nothing like my son. I did it, he whispered. I actually did it. He quickly shoved the papers into his briefcase. Let's go, Justin said. I have to get these to the bank before noon. The transfer takes an hour to clear. They hurried out of the kitchen. I watched them on the hallway camera as they moved toward the front door. Justin paused at the mantel. He looked at the photo of me and Sarah, the one I had rescued from Brittany the day before. He reached out and knocked it face down. Sorry, Dad, he muttered. But business is business. Then they were gone. The feed showed an empty house. The silence returned. I sat in the car, staring at the blank tablet screen. I felt hollowed out. I felt like I had been carved open with a dull knife. My son was gone. The boy I taught to ride a bike, the young man I walked through. His first heartbreak, he didn't exist anymore. There was only a criminal named Justin who lived in his skin. I wiped the tears from my face with a handkerchief. I took a deep breath. The sadness began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. It was the same resolve I used to feel when I had to fire a dangerous worker at the steel mill. It was necessary. It was for the safety of everyone else. Harlan reached over and turned off the tablet. He pulled a cigar from his pocket, but didn't light it. He just rolled it between his fingers. We have the video, Harlan said. We have the audio. We have the metadata timestamps. And the police are already at the bank waiting for him to present those forged documents. He looked at me, his eyes full of a grim respect. You held the line, Garrett. That was the hardest thing a father could ever do, but you did it. I looked out the window at my house. It looked the same as it always did. But it wasn't a home anymore. It was evidence. Is it enough? I asked. My voice was steady but quiet. Harlan nodded. It is more than enough. Attempted grand larceny, forgery in the first degree, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse. And since he used the mail to send the eviction notice earlier, we can probably tack on mail fraud too. Harlan started the car engine. The deep rumble vibrated through the seats. He is not just an ungrateful son anymore, Garrett Harlan said, putting the car into gear. He is a predator, and we just caught him in the cage. Drive, I said. Take me to the bank. You don't have to be there, Garrett Harlan said softly. The police can handle it. You don't have to watch him get cuffed. Yes, I do, I said, staring straight ahead. He wanted me to be a witness to his success. So I will be a witness. I will watch him succeed in destroying himself. Harlan didn't argue. He pulled the car away from the curb. We drove toward the city center, following the same path Justin had taken. He was rushing toward his salvation, thinking he had won the race. He didn't know he was running straight off a cliff, and I was the gravity that was waiting for him at the bottom. The bottle of single malt scotch on the table was older than my son was when I first taught him how to tie his shoes. I poured a generous amount into a crystal glass and watched the amber liquid settle. It was a calm, quiet afternoon in Harlan's office, the kind of silence that usually brings peace. But today, the silence was being rhythmically murdered by the vibration of my cell phone on the mahogany table. It started at noon. Exactly 12 minutes after Justin would have walked into First National Bank. I could picture it perfectly in my mind. He would have strutted in, chest puffed out, holding his briefcase like it contained nuclear codes. He would have slapped those forged documents onto the desk of the loan officer, smiling that winning smile that had fooled me for decades. He would have asked for the express transfer. He would have been planning his victory dinner. And then the loan officer would have typed in the account number. She would have frowned. She would have typed it again. And then she would have looked up at him with that professional, apologetic look that bankers give when they are about to ruin your day. "Mr. Hawthorne," she would say, "we cannot process this transfer. The asset is frozen. The title for this property has a priority lien placed on it as of this morning by a company called Phoenix Holdings." I took a sip of the scotch. It burned pleasantly on its way down. The phone buzzed again. It danced across the table, rattling against the coaster. Justin calling. That was the 5th time in 2 minutes. I watched the screen light up and then go dark. Light up, go dark. It was like watching a lighthouse warning a ship that it was about to crash onto the rocks. But the ship was already sinking. I imagined the panic setting in. Justin standing in the bank lobby, sweat trickling down his back. He would be arguing. He would be screaming that it was a mistake. He would be realizing that the forgery he had just committed was useless because the house he stole didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to the shell company that I owned. He had stolen a hollow shell. The phone buzzed again. Missed call number 12. I reached into my inner jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. It was my last will and testament. I had drafted it 5 years ago, right after Sarah died. I remembered sitting in the lawyer's office weeping as I dictated the terms. I wanted to make sure Justin was taken care of. I wanted to make sure that when I joined Sarah, our boy would never have to worry about money. I unfolded the thick paper. It was heavy textured bond paper. I leave my entire estate, including real property, cash assets, and personal effects, to my beloved son, Justin Hawthorne. I read the words aloud. They sounded like a joke now, a cruel punchline to a tragedy. Beloved son. The phone buzzed. Missed call number 24. I picked up a pen from Harlan's desk. It was a heavy fountain pen with red ink. I uncapped it. The nib was sharp like a dagger. I looked at the name on the paper. Justin Hawthorne. I didn't hesitate. I drew a thick red line through his name. The ink bled into the paper, looking like a fresh wound. I didn't stop at one line. I crossed it out again, and again, until the name was nothing but a red blur, an unrecognizable scar on the page. The phone buzzed. Missed call number 35. I moved down the list. My vintage Ford truck. I crossed out Justin's name. I wrote in the name of the young mechanic down the street who always treated me with respect and never charged me for air in my tires. My collection of vinyl records. I crossed out Justin's name. I wrote in the local library donation fund, Sarah's jewelry, the pieces Brittany hadn't already pawned or stolen. I crossed out Justin's name. I decided I would have them buried with me. The phone buzzed. Missed call number 48. He was getting desperate now. He was probably out on the street pacing back and forth. The loan sharks were expecting their money by the end of the business day. The bank had rejected him. His father-in-law had rejected him. He had nowhere left to turn. Except me. He was calling the man he called senile. He was calling the man he tried to lock in a nursing home. He was calling the man he had robbed blind. He didn't want a father. He wanted a scapegoat. He wanted me to answer so he could scream at me, or beg me, or trick me into fixing his mess. I took another sip of scotch. I swirled the glass, watching the liquid coat the sides. The phone buzzed. Missed call number 60. I wondered what he was thinking. Was he remembering the times I carried him on my shoulders? Was he remembering the nights I helped him with his math homework? Or was he just thinking about his own skin? I knew the answer, and that knowledge broke my heart more than the poverty ever could. The phone buzzed. Missed call number 67. Then it stopped. The silence returned to the room, but it was heavy now, loaded with the weight of a severed bond. A moment later, the screen lit up with a different color. A text message. I looked at the preview. Dad, where are you? I opened the message. Dad, please pick up. I am so worried about you. You aren't at the house. I drove by and the door was locked. Are you okay? Please, I just want to know you are safe. Come home, Dad. We can fix whatever is wrong. I love you. I stared at the words. I love you. He typed those 3 words with the same fingers he used to forge my signature on a deed transfer. He typed those words while standing in the shadow of a bank where he tried to sell my home out from under me. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. He was trying to pivot. He was trying to play the concerned son card. He thought that if he could just get me on the phone, if he could just hear my voice, he could spin a new web. He thought I was still the old soft Garrett who would do anything for his boy. He was wrong. That Garrett died in the rain outside the steakhouse. I felt a wave of nausea. The hypocrisy was physical. It tasted like bile. He wasn't worried about my safety. He was worried because his get-out-of-jail-free card had just vanished. I put the glass down. I picked up the phone. For a second, I considered texting back. I considered telling him I knew everything. I considered telling him about the lottery ticket, about Phoenix Holdings, about the camera in the kitchen. But no, that would be a mercy. That would give him certainty. The worst punishment for a man like Justin wasn't anger. It was silence. It was the unknown. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to spend the next few hours looking over his shoulder, wondering why the bank knew about Phoenix Holdings, wondering where I was, wondering when the hammer was going to fall. I pressed the power button on the side of the phone. I held it down. "Goodbye, Justin," I whispered. The screen went black. I placed the phone face down on the table. I picked up the red pen again. I turned to the last page of the will. I signed my name at the bottom. A real signature. Strong. Defiant. I was done being a victim. I was done being a resource. I sat back in the chair and closed my eyes. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Time was running out for Justin. The loan sharks would be looking for him soon. The police were already building their file, and I was just sitting here enjoying a very expensive glass of scotch, waiting for the final act to begin. I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't happiness. It was the relief of a soldier who finally realizes the enemy isn't on the other side of the trench. The enemy was inside the bunker all along, and now I had finally thrown him out. I opened my eyes and looked at Harlan, who had just walked back into the room. "It is done," I said. Harlan nodded. He didn't ask what I meant. He knew. "The car is ready," Harlan said. "The police are waiting at the airport. He will try to run. They always try to run." "Let's go," I said, standing up. I left the phone on the table. I left the old will in the trash can. I walked out of the office and didn't look back. I had a date with Justice and I didn't want to be late. The first-class lounge at the international terminal smelled of lavender and money. It was a world of hushed tones and clinking crystal, a sanctuary for those who could pay to avoid the chaos of the common traveler. I stood outside the frosted glass doors, adjusting the cuffs of my new Italian suit. It was a navy blue Brioni tailored to perfection, hugging my shoulders in a way my old factory clothes never could. Next to me stood Harlan, checking his watch, and behind us were 4 officers from the fraud division, their badges gleaming under the airport lights. I pushed the doors open. The lounge was sparse. It didn't take long to find them. They were sitting in a corner booth near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the runway. Richard was sipping champagne, looking bored as he flipped through a golf magazine. Brittany was furiously typing on her phone, likely trying to move funds that no longer existed. And Justin. My son looked like a man on the verge of a cardiac event. He was sweating through his linen shirt, his leg bouncing nervously as he stared at the departure board. He was running. He thought if he could just get on that plane to Dubai, the loan sharks couldn't touch him, and the bank errors would just be something he could fix with a few emails from overseas. He didn't know that the flight he was waiting for was merely a fantasy. I walked across the plush carpet. My footsteps were silent, but my presence was heavy. I stopped 3 feet from their table. "Going somewhere, Justin?" I asked. My voice was calm, resonant, filling the quiet space. Justin jumped so hard, he knocked over his water glass. He spun around, his eyes widening in disbelief. He looked at my face, then down at my suit, then back at my face. He didn't recognize the man standing before him. He was looking for the hunched, broken retiree in a stained jacket. Instead, he found a titan. "Dad," he stammered, standing up slowly. "What? What are you doing here? And why are you dressed like that?" I didn't answer him. I looked at Richard. The older man lowered his magazine, his eyes narrowing as he assessed my attire. He knew quality when he saw it, and he looked confused. "Garrett," Richard said, his tone less condescending than usual. We didn't expect to see you. We are just taking a little family trip. Justin said you weren't feeling up to travel." "He lied," I said, simply keeping my eyes on my son. "He lies about everything, even about who owns the house he lives in." Justin's face went pale. He tried to force a laugh, but it came out as a strangled wheeze. "Dad, stop it," he hissed, stepping closer to me, trying to keep his voice down. "You are making a scene. Go home. We will talk when I get back. I promise I will bring you a souvenir." He was still trying. He still thought he was the puppet master. "There is no home to go to, Justin," I said. "At least not for you. And there is no trip. Your passport has been flagged." "Flagged?" Brittany squawked, standing up. "What are you talking about? Who do you think you are? I am the CEO of Phoenix Holdings," I declared, my voice rising, just enough to turn heads in the lounge. "The company that owns every single debt your husband has. The company that holds the mortgage on his office, the lien on his car, and as of this morning, the title to the house he tried to steal from me." Justin froze. The name Phoenix Holdings hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, gripping the edge of the table. "You," he whispered. "You are Phoenix, but how you have $14 in your account?" I checked. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket. I pulled out the lottery ticket. It was encased in a protective plastic sleeve now, but the coffee stain was still visible on the corner. "Do you remember this, Justin?" I asked, holding it up. "You threw this at me in a restaurant 3 days ago. You told me it was worth $1.50. You told me it was all I was worth." Justin stared at the ticket. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "It was a winner," I said softly. "Win for life. $4.8 million. The silence in the lounge was absolute. Even the bartender had stopped wiping glasses. Richard dropped his magazine. Brittany let out a gasp that sounded like she had been punched in the gut. $4 million. Justin choked out. His eyes filled with a sudden greedy light. "Dad. That is amazing. We are rich, You did this to surprise us, right? This is all a big joke. You bought the debt to save me." He took a step toward me, his arms opening for a hug. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, with the noose around his neck, he thought he could charm his way out. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him with a profound sadness. "I didn't buy the debt to save you, son. I used the money to buy my freedom from you." I nodded to the officers behind me. They stepped forward, their movements efficient and professional. Before Justin could react, they had him turned around and pressed against the table. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed through the room. Click. Click. Justin Hawthorne, the lead officer, said, "You are under arrest for first-degree forgery, wire fraud, elder abuse, and attempted grand larceny. You have the right to remain silent." Justin began to struggle. No, this is a mistake, Dad. Tell them I had your permission. Tell them I signed it for you because your hands were shaking." I stepped closer, leaning in so only he could hear me. "My hands are steady, Justin," I whispered, "and so is my memory. I have you on video. I have the tracing paper you used. I have the notary who rolled on you 10 minutes ago to save his own skin. It is over." Justin looked at me, his eyes wild with terror. He realized then that there was no way out. The father he had exploited was gone. The victim was gone. "Dad, please," he screamed, tears streaming down his face as the officers hauled him up. "I am your son. You can't send me to prison. I will be killed in there. I owe money to bad people." I watched him struggle, a man who had never faced a consequence in his life, finally facing them all at once. "You should have thought about that before you tried to put me in a nursing home," I said coldly. Justin turned his head, looking desperately at his wife and father-in-law. "Brittany, Richard, do something, call a lawyer, help me." I looked at Brittany. She was standing frozen, clutching her Hermes bag. She looked from her husband in handcuffs to me in my $4 million suit. I saw the calculation in her eyes. She was a survivor, just like a cockroach is a survivor. I didn't know," she stammered, looking at the police. "Officer, I had no idea. He told me the house was a gift. He told me everything was legal. I am a victim here too, Brittany." Justin screamed, his voice breaking. Richard stood up, smoothing his jacket. He didn't even look at Justin. He looked at me, giving me a respectful nod. "Garrett." "This is a tragedy," Richard said smoothly. "I had no idea the boy was a criminal. If I had known he was stealing from his own father, well, obviously the Dubai trip is cancelled. I will be cooperating fully with the investigation." Richard. "You ate my food! You drank my wine!" Justin howled as the officers began to drag him toward the exit. They turned on him in seconds. The family he had destroyed me to impress had abandoned him the moment the check bounced. I watched as my son was dragged through the lounge, his expensive shoes scuffing the carpet, his screams attracting the attention of every traveler in the terminal. Dad. Please, I love you." I am sorry I stood there until his voice faded away. I felt Harlan's hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" Harlan asked softly. I looked at the empty space where my son had stood. I looked at the ticket in my hand. Then I looked at the reflection of the strong, dignified man in the window. I won the jackpot. "Harlan," I said, my voice thick with emotion but clear as a bell, "the money is nice. But seeing the truth, seeing him face justice, that is the real prize." I turned to Richard and Brittany, who were now trying to make themselves invisible. "My lawyers will be in touch about the furniture in my house," I said to Brittany. "You have 24 hours to vacate. If I find a single scratch on my wife's photo frame, I will spend every cent of this $4 million making sure you end up in a cell right next to him." I didn't wait for their answer. I turned and walked out of the lounge, flanked by my friend. I walked out into the busy terminal, a free man. The weight of 30 years of parenting a monster had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I took a deep breath. The air in the airport didn't smell like goodbyes anymore. It smelled like a new beginning. The silence that followed Justin's arrest was heavy and suffocating. The airport terminal, once filled with the noise of travelers, seemed to pause as the reality of what had just happened settled over us. I turned to leave. My business concluded, but a hand grabbed the sleeve of my jacket. It was Brittany. Her perfect facade had cracked completely. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black streaks, and she was trembling so violently she could barely stand. She didn't look like the arrogant woman who had threatened to burn my wife's photos anymore. She looked like a frightened child. Garrett, please, she sobbed, dropping to her knees right there on the polished floor of the first-class lounge. You have to listen to me. It was all him. I told him not to do it. I begged him to stop. He forced me to go along with it. He said he would leave me if I didn't support him. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. I am a victim here too, Garrett. You can't let them take everything from me. I have nowhere to go. Please let me keep the car. Let me stay in the condo. I will testify against him. I will say whatever you want. Just don't leave me with nothing. I looked down at her. For a moment I remembered the day she married my son. I remembered thinking she was ambitious, perhaps a bit materialistic, but I hoped she would make him happy. I realized now that she was just a mirror reflecting his own greed back at him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded photocopy. It was the loan application Justin had submitted to the underground lenders 3 months ago, the one Harlan had uncovered. I unfolded it slowly. You say you knew nothing, Brittany. You say he forced you. I pointed to a signature at the bottom of the page right next to Justin's. Then whose signature is this? I asked, my voice devoid of any warmth. It says here that you co-signed for the loan. It says you knowingly pledged assets that did not belong to you as collateral. And here on the email correspondence with the nursing home. That is your email address authorizing the deposit for my room. Brittany stopped crying. Her face went slack. She stared at the paper, then at me. The mask of the victim vanished, replaced by the cold, hard look of a gambler who realizes the house has won. I didn't think you would find that, she whispered. My lawyer has already sent a copy to the prosecutor, I said, stepping back from her. You are not a victim, Brittany. You were his accomplice. You were driving the getaway car while he robbed the bank. I turned to the officers who were still standing nearby. She is named in the warrant as a co-conspirator, I said. I suggest you take her into custody before she tries to book another flight. Brittany screamed as the officers moved in. She cursed me. She called me a bitter old man. She screamed that I was ruining her life. I didn't look back. I walked out of the terminal with Harlan by my side. I walked out into the cool night air, and for the first time in years, I took a breath that didn't feel heavy with worry. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and logistics. I didn't go back to the house to sleep. I couldn't. The memory of their betrayal was soaked into the walls. Instead, I hired a team of movers. I gave them specific instructions. Pack Sarah's things, pack my clothes, pack the tools from the garage. Everything else, the furniture Brittany had bought, the fancy electronics, the expensive rugs, sell it all, and donate the money to the local homeless shelter. I sold the house 3 days later to a young couple who were expecting their first child. I saw the way they looked at the garden, the way they talked about painting the nursery. It felt right. It was time for that house to be a home again, not a battlefield. I took the money from the sale, along with the lottery winnings, and I drove west. I didn't stop until the skyscrapers of the city were replaced by the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains. I bought a ranch in Montana, 300 acres of green valleys and pine forests, with a stream that ran clear and cold right through the backyard. It was the place Sarah and I had talked about for 40 years. We used to look at pictures in magazines and dream about retiring there. She never made it. But I like to think she is there with me now, in the whisper of the wind through the trees. My life is different now. I wake up with the sun. I drink my coffee on the porch, watching the mist rise off the mountains. I don't wear suits anymore. I wear jeans and flannel shirts, and my hands are dirty again, but it is good dirt. It is the dirt of working my own land, of planting a garden, of fixing fences. I am not alone. Lying at my feet right now is Buster, a golden retriever mix I adopted from the shelter the day I moved in. He had been abused by his previous owners, left tied up in a yard without food. When I first saw him, he was scared of his own shadow. He reminded me of myself. We saved each other. Now he never leaves my side. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was the promissory note for the debt I had bought. The debt that had sent my son to prison for 10 years. I looked at Justin's signature one last time. I had visited him once a month ago. We spoke through a glass partition. He looked older, harder. He didn't apologize. He just asked if I had brought any money for his commissary account. I told him no. I told him I brought him something better. I brought him the consequences of his actions. It was the only gift I had left to give. I looked at the paper in my hand. It was worth millions on paper. But to me it was just a chain that bound me to a past full of pain and deception. I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I tore the paper in half, then in half again, and again, until it was nothing but confetti. I opened my hand and let the wind take it. I watched the pieces scatter over the valley, disappearing into the tall grass. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel regret. I felt light. I sat back down and rested my hand on Buster's head. He looked up at me with big brown eyes full of unconditional love. "Family isn't about whose blood runs in your veins," I said to the dog, though I was really speaking to the wind. "Family is about who respects you, who protects you, who stands by you when the storm comes." I lost a son. That is a pain that will never fully go away. But I found something I thought I had lost forever. I found my dignity. I found my peace. And most importantly, I found myself. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the stars began to come out one by one. I sat there in the dark, listening to the silence of the mountains. It was a beautiful sound. It was the sound of a life reclaimed. This story is a reminder to everyone listening that you teach people how to treat you. For years, I taught my son that he could use me, that I would always be there to clean up his mess, that my love was a bottomless pit he could draw from without ever giving anything back. I thought I was being a good father. I was wrong. I was being an enabler. True love requires boundaries. It requires respect. If someone in your life, whether it is a child, a spouse, or a parent, is draining you dry and treating you like an option rather than a priority, you have the right to close the door. You have the right to say no. You have the right to protect your peace. It is not selfish. It is survival. Don't wait until you are standing in the rain with nothing left but a lottery ticket to realize your worth. You are valuable right now, and you deserve to be surrounded by people who see that value. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear this message today. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut ties with a toxic family member to save yourself? How did you find the strength to do it? I read every comment, and I want to build a community here where we can support each other. Thank you for listening, and remember, the best chapter of your life is the one you write for yourself. See you in the next story.